You are listening to Unravel with Natalie Denise.
Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Nightly with Natalie, a segment of Unravel with Natalie Denise, and this providing news from the Daily Traffic, my alternative human trafficking news platform. So glad to have you guys. Thank you so much for listening to me. Be sure to hit that like button on the way in as you guys come in. I surely appreciate that. And for those of you guys that are listening to me on audio podcast, it really helps me if you leave a positive review. So that way, hey, I will maybe get this news out to the people that need to hear it, right? Because because it's not getting out. It's not getting out. And there's definitely new headlines every single time. We do this every night. And that's the case. So let's say hello to the chat. What's going on? Hey, the only. Hello, the real Rice. Hello, hello, hello. What's going on, guys? Let's go ahead and jump into some headlines here. One that is surprising. I very seldomly know every single influencer in the pro-MAGA space. But apparently this guy has been arrested for human trafficking. And you guys know the name of the game, right? You guys know the name of the game here. I come for everybody. I don't care whether you are pro-MAGA or pro-Democrat. I don't care what your view spectrum is. I don't care. I come for everybody. And if you are out there exploiting human beings, if you're holding them against their will, I will surely talk about it. All right. So this is apparently and this is coming from the Daily Beast. So as you guys would imagine, the Daily Beast is going to have their little punching points in description. Nonetheless, it looks to be that he is trouble with the law. It says police raid MAGA king, though they call him the king of toxic masculinity, in human trafficking investigation. And this guy, just to give you a background of who he is affiliated with, says Romanian police raided the home of prominent pro-Trump online personality Andrew Tate this month as part of a human trafficking investigation, bringing new attention to Tate's ties to leading figures in the American MAGA movement. And we'll see. Like I said, what's fair is fair. If there's anybody out there that is exploiting human beings for their own gratification, we're going to talk about it. Whether they're pro-MAGA, whether they're whatever, don't care. Let's talk about it, right? So, Romanian police have raided the home of prominent pro-Trump online personality Andrew Tate this month as part of a human trafficking investigation. Before April 11th raid, Tate was best known as a kickboxer and a vocal Trump supporter in the online far right. On social media, Tate portrayed himself as a wealthy cigar-smoking playboy, prompting one admirer to dub him the king of toxic masculinity. I guess that's a term that they proudly owned. But Tate, and just for context, a lot of conservatives, MAGA people, whatever you want to call them, people on the right, they sometimes poke fun at, how the left or the, a more liberal people, they use these terms, to smite the other side. So they'll call them like, white supremacists and toxic masculines and all masculinity, all these things. So sometimes what conservative people will do is they'll take those terms and they'll wear it, especially when it's toxic masculinity, because usually that term is just thrown out for a masculine person. So that's why sometimes the conservatives will wear it as a hat, right? So they're openly calling him that, and he wore it as a hat, right? But Tate's treatment of women had an ugly side in 2016. He was booted off the British version of Big Brother over a video of him hitting a woman with a belt. This March, Britain's Daily Mirror tabloid profiled him and his brother Tristan Tate and their Romania-based business, which used webcam models to trick men into sending the brothers tens of thousands of dollars. In one video on his YouTube channel, Andrew Tate said 40% of the reason he moved to Romania was because Romanian police were less likely to pursue sexual assault allegations. And this is a dark truth. So this guy, if he... Well, actually, let's go to the video because I want to see it. If he's saying this openly, then he has some insight to the Romanian law enforcement, because this is true. A lot of people in Romania, they escape justice, where a lot of child trafficking happens in Romania. Let's take a look at this video. Hear the audio for those of you on podcast. Let's take a look. Oh, right.
Yesterday, say, okay, have you got physical evidence? Or is there CCTV proof?
Here we go.
This is probably 14% of the reason I moved to Romania, because in Eastern Europe, none of this garbage flies. If you're going to go to the police and say he raped me back in 1988, so we should have done something about it then. You go to the police and say he raped me yesterday, say, okay, have you got physical evidence? Or is there CCTV proof? Where'd it happen? Okay, let's go interview him right now. And if it wasn't really rape, we went to the club, we got drunk, she agreed to go back to my house, we started having sex, and then we carried on having sex, and then we had sex, and she didn't say anything wrong, and then she texted me afterwards, and I didn't text back, and now she's saying I raped her. The police would be like, okay, she's an idiot, fine. But no, not in the West. In the West, you can tell them that exact story. You're still fucked. You're fucked in the West. And people say, why do you live in Romania? And I explain my 5 reasons. One of them is the Me Too era. They go, oh, well, you're a rapist. I say, no, I'm not a fucking rapist. But I like the idea of being able to just say, to do what I want. I like being free. And if you're a man living in England or Germany or America or any of the Western world right now, you've decided to live in a country where any woman, any ex, any fucking bitch who works at Greg's who you bought a pasty from, at some point in the future can destroy your life. This Me Too era bullshit has not protected women. It's just destroyed the safety of men.
Okay, so I heard the beginning part. I'm not going to play the whole thing over again, but I do want to hear the beginning part where he's mentioning the Romanian justice system. Let's take a listen.
This is probably 14% of the reason I moved to Romania, because in Eastern Europe, none of this garbage flies. If you're going to go to the police and say he raped me back in 1988, so we should have done something about it then. If you go to the police and say he raped me yesterday, say, okay, have you got physical evidence? Or is there CCTV proof? Where'd it happen? Okay, let's go interview him right now. And if it wasn't really rape, we went to the club, we got drunk, she agreed to go back to my house, we started having sex, and then we carried.
Okay, so he said it at the very beginning, very, very fast. This is the reason why I moved to Romania, because in Romania, none of this stuff flies. And he's talking about the Me Too movement, how all of a sudden, people were more open about, what happened to them in a sexual abuse situation or a sexual assault situation, that you can't go back like to the 90s or like 2001 and say, oh, he, I think that statement is dangerous because, think about the Epstein situation, right? Like these victims, for years, they had a lot of the elites corralling them. And they didn't feel empowered enough to come out with their sexual allegations because they knew that the system was against them. So that part's very nuanced, and that I don't think that's a fair statement to say that it just ruins men's lives, because sometimes these victims, they do have a very good probable cause that they just could not come out in the past. I mean, think about it, in the 80s, 90s. They didn't have the technology that we do now or the communication circulation. So it is different, and every situation is different when it comes to sexual assault. So I don't agree with that. But what I find very interesting is his mention of Romania, because in a psychological sense, you're saying, this is why I moved to Romania, because the police don't play that. So take that part. This is why I moved to Romania. So is that an undertone for saying that I fully acknowledge that there is some possible dark past tied to me, or that I plan on doing anything? I'm just making some, what am I saying? I'm just analyzing this situation. It's just a weird thing to say. You know what I mean? So we heard it. You watched it for yourself. He said that, came out of his mouth. So it says here, in one video on his YouTube channel, Andrew Tate said 40% of the reason he moved to Romania was because the Romanian police were less likely to pursue sexual assault allegations. Tate's unsavory activities didn't stop him from building links with the stars of the Trumpian right in 2019. Just FYI, just FYI, because if, and I've seen, I'm just going to say this as like someone who has been around a lot of influencers and a lot of like these personalities, right? Like it is a whole other end on the other side where, these people seem like they're at a facade. And I'm not saying all of these people, I'm just saying some. I've been around some personalities where I'm like, yo, you're like this in real life? You're like this off the camera? Or like you treat people like that? You know what I mean? Like I have been in those situations where I've seen these big personalities on social media and the alternative media and how they really are in real life. So this is why I'm going through this, right? Because we just don't know. And I'm not saying that I've been around any of the people that are going to be mentioned because I see names already that I have not. So I'll be transparent about that. But I'm just going to say this because if they ever saw anything, or heard in a close circle that he was this way, why didn't they speak out, right? But again, I'm not making that assumption. I'm just saying this is why I am putting these names out there, right? So this is who he's associated with. He shared a meal with far-right cable news commentator Jack Posobiec and InfoWars host Paul Watkins. Okay. And appeared in multiple times on InfoWars shows, in Trump's Washington hotel, and sometimes at for that, sometimes these shows just on the media side, they just put guests on. They do background check and all these things, but sometimes it's not in depth. They're just interested on topical things. So that's why I'm just saying on the media side, sometimes they don't go that far or that deep to know something to this extent, if you understand. So anyway, in Trump's Washington hotel, Tate posed for a picture with Brexit advocate Nigel Farage and sat in a group in the Trump hotel lobby with the likes of Pizzagate conspiracy theorist Mike Cernovich and future January 6th protest organizer Ali Alexander. Cernovich visited the Tate brothers in Romania later that year. Wait a minute, Mike Cernovich visited the Tate brothers in Romania later that year, describing them as his friends in the description of his podcast. Okay, so again, I'm just naming this. I'm not saying anybody is accused of anything. While Cernovich built his name online by making false, of course, they're good. Of course, this is where my criticism comes because, these left-leaning, biased media outlets like to say the conspiracy theory on the pizza gate thing, blah, 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 blah. Child trafficking is a conspiracy theory. That's what they're trying to make this little paragraph here. Okay, so I'm going to skip over it. All right, so there was video of this human trafficking raid. Let's get straight to it. There's video of this human trafficking raid that shows that police officers armed with rifles milling among Tate's sports cars with a neon Tate logo on a wall in the background. Another video showed Tate and his brother being shoved into vans by police officers before being driven away from their homes. Romanian newspaper reported that the raid was sparked over reports that an American woman was being held captive at Tate's house. Police found both the American and a Romanian woman in the building during the raid. According to the report, in a statement on the raid to the Daily Beast, a U.S. State Department spokesperson alluded to the reported abduction of an American citizen but declined to comment further. So I'm not going to go. The rest is, poking. We wasted all that. We didn't waste time, but I'm saying like we just went through all of this to go through all of his affiliates just to get to this one paragraph that told us what happened. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to that Romanian article, and this is a Romanian article detailing this raid. And I translated this, as you guys can see in the top bar where it says Google translated to English. So this was all in Romanian just for transparency. And it says in the title, the headline, police descended with masks in the villa of the fighter Tristan Tate. Bianca Dragusanu's ex-boyfriend, the British millionaire, allegedly kidnapped two women to sexually exploit them. And it says here, police and prosecutors a pair of brothers, Tristan and allegedly kidnapping 2 women, one of whom is an American citizen and who were being trafficked on the sex market. In fact, the police were alerted even by the officials of the U.S. Embassy in Bucharest. Okay, Daily Beast, this is the stuff you need to hear. This is why I love like local news. This is why I go through local news on my daily news briefings with human trafficking, because what time and where. So then they have an update. The Office of Information and Public Relations within the Directorate for the Investigation of Organized Crime and Terrorism announced on Tuesday that on Monday, April 11th, the prosecutor's office attached to the Buffalo court ordered the decline in favor of the DICOT to DIICOT central infrastructure in which investigations were being conducted into crime of unlawful deprivation of liberty. On Monday, April 11th, the prosecutors of DIICOT central structure ordered the extension of the criminal investigation under the aspect of committing the crimes of human trafficking and rape. In the case, the prosecutor's office attached to the Buffalo court conducted home searches of 2 buildings in Efov County, and good interests were seized to solve the case. Again, this is translated, so the translation is a little weird. The wording's a little weird, okay? But I'm going to proceed. The prosecutors of DICOT central structure heard during the night of 11, what's this date? So April 20th, 2022, several witnesses in order to clarify the factual situation. The investigations are being continued by the Directorate for the Investigation of Organized Crime and Terrorism central structure with the support of BCCO. Okay. Update. The mother of one of the girls who was in the villa owned by the Tate brothers when the masked men broke in gave statements to journalists. They said, "My child is a good child. He never bothered me. I always asked her if she had a boyfriend." Okay, they meant she never bothered me, which I think in trying to say she's a good kid. You know, she never gave me trouble. It's just translated a little funny. And then it says, "I always asked her if she had a boyfriend, and she said, 'No, mommy, I'm just going to college.' She's a very good child." I think that's why he recruited her, because she's too naive. She told me she was going out for a drink with a friend. It seemed strange to me from the beginning. Since I saw pictures of the girl he said he was dating. I saw the girl had a more dubious face. I didn't like her, but I said, okay, this is not making sense. I'm like getting mixed up. I thought she was talking about the girl. And I think she is talking about the girl. It's just that this is translated so weird. Okay, I'm going to try my best here. I'm going to interpret it in my own words. But I said not to say anything to my child. So I think that the girl sent the mother a photo of maybe one of the Tate brothers, and he had a dubious smile. I think that's what she's trying to say, and that she got a funny feeling. I thought he was a colleague of hers, and she also goes out for coffee with colleagues. She doesn't do anything wrong. That's why I think that's why. Clearly, the entourage is to blame. My daughter is 20 years old. She's in her 2nd year of college. And by the way, just to remind you, we're talking about the possible alleged victim of the Tate brothers, and they're being accused of sex trafficking this girl that the mother is talking about. She used to tell me everything. She went to several presentations. I think that's what he does, not Tristan Tate. He recruits naive girls from presentations. So now she's alluding that the other Tate brother, Andrew Tate, which was featured in the Daily Beast, is the one who recruited her. That's what I think. I think that that's where the little fish picked her up and brought her to this one. That he always sent me pictures, or she always sent me pictures. "Look, mommy, I'm at the presentation. We stay that way. They gave us so much money. The child told me everything. He didn't hide, and she didn't hide anything from me. I think he saw her naively and politely brought her there. He wanted to sell her here or abroad. What would she have said? Come on, this is just too good. It's naive," said the woman. That she always sent her pictures. This is repetitive. I think, okay, it repeats. It repeats. So, concluding, police officers were informed on Monday by a representative of the Diplomatic Secretary Bureau of the U.S. Embassy in Bucharest regarding the fact that there is information according to which in a building located on Washington Street in the city of Voluntari, Emma Ada Gabi, a 21-year-old American citizen, is said to have been abducted. According to sources close to the investigation, the IFOV judiciary contacted the Diplomatic Secretary Bureau, and after obtaining additional information, the police officers from Voluntari notified ex officio about the commission of a possible crime of illegal deprivation of liberty, held against her will, in other words. Investigators determined that the victim was in the villa of the brothers Tristan and Andrew Tate, British citizens. The police obtained 2 search warrants through the prosecutor's office attached to the Bufty court from the court for deprivation of liberty. Following the raid, the investigators discovered that in addition to the American woman, a Romanian woman was also a former British Tristan Tate settled in Romania with his brother and bought a villa in Pipera. They inherited from their father a hotel in Thailand through which they would have amassed a significant fortune, which would amount to millions of euros. Tristan and his brother Emery Andrew Tate, called Cobra, moved to Romania where they bought a villa in Pipera. Okay, this is the part that gets a little interesting. Had set up a real video chat studio in their home. And I don't know what that means. It could mean a podcast, or it could mean sexual exploitation video setup. But anyway, like I said, if you're out there exploiting people, I'm gonna talk about it. So that being said, whether you're pro-MAGA, whether you're a Democrat, and here's the thing, like Beast, I think I skipped over this part. They said that they asked for people for comments. The Tate brothers didn't respond to requests for comment. Tate's pro-Trump colleagues Cernovich, Watkins, Posobiec, and Alexander also didn't respond to emails from the Daily Beast. Tate appeared to address his arrest in an Instagram picture posted after his arrest, featuring him smoking a cigar in a stage interrogation room as a faux police officers loomed over him. Tate added in a caption, "Officer, I think we can all agree that B words love to lie. The raid on the Tate's villa isn't the first time that the manosphere and the far-right men's online community that Tate belongs to has been tied to serious criminal activity." So, I mean, it is a bit all over the place. I don't know, man. This is pretty egregious if this is all going to pan out. They said that they found 2 women locked in the house. I just wonder how he's going to try to spin that, right? That's crazy. But you know what's also crazy? I tried to search the story everywhere else, and there aren't a lot of stories on this. And you would think there would be, because it's a MAGA person, and plenty of these liberal outlets would just they would love to report on something like this. But yeah, this is like one of the first stories that I saw, and it's from the Daily Beast. Anyway, let's continue on. All right, next one. Okay, I have to comment on this because I just have to be open about my views about this new movement of trying to validate sex work as real work. I think that this is a travesty in our society. I don't believe that this is this is not a thing to advocate for. I don't think that this is safe. This is actually going to hurt the trafficking movement, anti-trafficking movement, encourage the actual trafficking movement that you see in every single zip code. And basically the argument is, we should legalize prostitution. Sex work is real work. It's a real position. And you've seen this even advocated on the likes of Teen Vogue. Teen Vogue made a whole article about this. Like, oh, hey, and by the way, Teen Vogue targets tweens from 11 to 17 years old, 18 maybe even. And so they utilize their platform to try to propagandize this idea that sex work is a real job, So here, a job is a job. Trafficking laws increase stigma for consensual sex workers. I just, again, like you always see a lot of these, like you see more stories from media outlets that are like, but the sex workers who want to do it. And then they forget about the human trafficked victims, right? It's like, why can't you put a balance in there? Like, be a balance. If you're going to talk about sex workers wanting this to, become like law and or, you want this and all these things, put the perspective of a human trafficked survivor, someone who exited the life, right? I think that's the least bit fair. But you always see these biased articles here. And they say some states, this is coming from tpr.org, some states have stopped prosecuting sex workers, and in other states, including Texas, are making it harder to buy and sell consensual sex. These laws forwarding to minimize sex trafficking by targeting the demand, the clientele. Though the goal is to minimize sex trafficking, these laws make it harder for consensual sex work to operate above ground safely. Like, and what we don't talk about, like, okay, let's talk about like the physical sense. Like, let's talk about the science first, right? Like, when you are promiscuous like this, willingly, you're opening yourself up to a lot of possible diseases, a lot of possible, bad situations, like, violent Johns. I mean, there's a lot of nuances in this whole thing. And, that's not at all to shame somebody who came out the life or who is trying to get out the life. I'm just saying people who make this a culture is my point. Like, people who make this a culture that, sex work is real work, is really perverting traditional values, right? And they're openly doing this to also, again, I mentioned Teen Vogue, who wrote an entire article targeting to teens that this is real work, when this shouldn't be normalized, right? I think that this is crossing the bounds. There are no laws in the United States that explicitly protect sex workers from violence, from sexual misconduct, or from predatory clients. And that's exactly my point. You're walking into situations where you have to rely on the mind of the John, not on the law. The mind of the John and the mind of the trafficker and the pimp, right? You're not, and every John is going to be different because everybody is different, right? So if everybody's different, then Johns have to be different. Some Johns are going to be more violent. Some Johns are going to be more aggressive. Some Johns are going to be more, they're going to cross boundaries a lot more. I mean, there's so many, again, variances to this. So this is exactly what I mean, right? This is, there's no law that a criminal mind is going to pay mind to just because it exists. So from sexual misconduct, from predatory clients, because of that, the industry remains dangerous. No, it remains dangerous because it is dangerous. It's not because of the laws, it's because it's dangerous because of said things that I just mentioned. Olive, whose first name we're using to protect her identity, said that she first got into sex work to make a living. Some friends helped her up with the first clients in San Antonio, but she decided to follow the money. She moved to New York, where she said she can set the prices she wants. They're almost used to it in New York. In San Antonio, they haggle the F out of me and they try to put a price on what I should be charging and stuff. She says she offers full service intercourse, and that she said there's a big difference between her work now and her experience working in Texas. I can actually charge prices that I'm comfortable with in New York, and it's fine, and they're almost used to it, she said. They repeated this quote. Why am I finding this? But money isn't the only difference in New York. Charges for prostitution have been dwindling for a decade. Just last April, the city formally decriminalized sex work for those selling sex, like Olive. They're not charging sex workers, but they are charging buyers. New York joined other recent cities like Baltimore, Philadelphia, San Francisco, Ann Arbor in showing leniency towards sex workers. If a client tries to get back at me, I can call the police, she said. If I have to call the police, the client would be the one that get prosecuted and not me. And you know what? I'm going to be fair. I'm going to be fair and say that I do agree that there should be leniency towards getting so body. A lot of times a woman does get arrested, and that is just the truth. You know, this is me being fair and balanced. That is what happens. And the fault of the system and our society is that there isn't enough support for sex traffic victims or people that want to get out the life. And so they just feel more comfortable to jump back in because it's like there's not enough safe houses. There's not a lot of rehabilitation, resources, if you will. It's just, it doesn't exist, right? And so they get recycled back on the streets. This happens to children as well, especially those that are vulnerable and have a broken background. But I revisit my point that this is not a safe idea to decriminalize this and make it more normalized, because you're also opening up the door to traffickers to facade what they're doing as a consensual work when really they're psychologically controlling the victim into doing what they're doing or what they're expected to do. You better say that you're doing this willingly. You better say that, you do this by choice. Or if you don't, when you get back, you're going to pay for it. Stuff like that. These are the conversations we never hear. So, if there is a victim out there and this is decriminalized, it's a hard thing to argue, right? Because at the same time, I do believe that survivors need a lot more support and they do need consideration in the justice system, right? I think that the justice system should absolutely give heavy consideration that they were being trafficked and not being a criminal, because then if a girl's being held against her will and they're forced to sell their bodies by someone that's pulling the strings and they get in trouble for it, then they have a criminal record now, and they're they have a blemish on the record, and then they can't get jobs and things like this. So again, hard thing to articulate, but at the same time, I know what's right and I know what's dangerous. And this is not a good thing for our society. And I'll also put in the spiritual side too, right? Like, think about these women going partner to partner, being, they're promiscuous. You're creating soul ties with each one of these Johns, right? And a soul tie, for those that don't know, in the Bible, when it mentions marriage in the book of Genesis, they talk about you becoming one with your partner, right? With your husband or your wife. And so when you become one with multiple people, you're joining your soul with all these other people, unless you pray for the severance of the soul tie, right? And so when you're becoming one, that's really messing you up psychologically and spiritually. And this is what creates an open door for that trauma bond, right? And that's how we know it is. We know it as a trauma bond, and that's the scientific term behind that. But a soul tie, it's all tied into that. The soul tie bonds you spiritually to these people. And so, all these Johns, they have bad spirits in them, and you're conjoining yourself over and over and over again. You're really infiltrating your spirit to a very, very dark place, right? So anyway, that's, I know that's deep, but it's the truth. It is the truth. And, it makes me more sad for the sex workers that want to willingly do this. To be honest with you, I'm not at all like directing my energy to be angry at them at all. I just think that they're deprived of real love, and that's what makes me sad for them. It breaks my heart that people would resort to this type of work, just because they think that that's the only option, when they need to be rehabilitated, they need to be prayed for, they need to be loved on, like real love, not superficial love, right? So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about. I just use this as like an outline for that. But we'll move on to the next story here, right? And this is coming from The Independent. A former child migrant lifts lid on UK's biggest sex abuse scandal. Yeah, this is going to be long. So, it's not that long, but I'll give you the meats and potatoes. British child migrants who were physically and sexually abused as children at a notorious orphanage farm in rural Australia have had their long fight for justice immortalized in a new book. Reckoning by David Hill, a former child migrant himself who went on to become Australian Broadcasting Corporation's chairman, is the follow-up work of The Forgotten Children, which was published 15 years ago. While the earlier book was an oral history of dozens of firsthand accounts of children who were sent to Fairbridge Farm School in Molong, the latest work details how it sent shockwaves through the British and Australian governments. The child migration scheme between 1912 and 1980 saw about 130,000 children from largely impoverished backgrounds sent from the UK to Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Zimbabwe, then Rhodesia. Initially, and listen, has history really changed much? This is back in 1912 to 1980. 130 children. 130,000 children. Has history really changed that much? All these little agencies that facade themselves as this work to help, and really they don't. They're doing the opposite. Initially, all children were sent on their own, but it changed in 1957 when one parent scheme was introduced, which allowed those with parents to have one of them also go to Australia to set up a home and find work. Once the children were legally allowed to leave school, the child and the parent would be reunited. The farm school in which Mr. Hill and around 1,000 other orphans of the empire were sent had been blacklisted by the Home Office in 1956, but would continue to operate the next 2 decades. And they say the Australian government, the New South Wales government, and the British government, the Australian government, New South Wales, and the British government are all guilty of lying, denying, and covering up. They all got caught, Mr. Hill told the PA news agency. Now, all of those governments and the Fairbridge institutions in the UK, South Wales, they've all acknowledged it did happen. They apologized to the victims and they agreed to pay financial compensation. Okay, so here it is right here. That primed us for this part. His 2007 book, which followed by a nationally broadcast documentary in Australia, would prompt more former residents to come forward with revelations of mistreatment, rape, and molestation at the farm school. By the time most of this 200-odd survivors received a record payout of $24 million Australian dollars from the NSW government in 2015, more than 60% claimed to have been abused. 2 years later, at an independent inquiry into sexual abuse, IICSA, in London, former Prime Minister Gordon Brown would call all child migration government-induced human trafficking that was a bigger sex scandal than Jimmy Savile. Imagine. By the way, I just saw a Jimmy Savile documentary. It was really interesting. It's one of the only documentaries that's actually transparent. Mr. Brown said, but this is pretty big if this was bigger than Jimmy Savile. Mr. Brown said that this, by the way, for those that don't know who Jimmy Savile is, look him up. Look him up. Jimmy, and then his last name Savile, spelled Savile. He was a BBC news personality in the 60s. He did charity work. but there was a dark side to all that. He was actually molesting kids left and right. So this is bigger than that. Mr. Brown said, this seems to be as probably the biggest national sex abuse scandal, bigger than what people have alleged about Sable, bigger than what people have alleged about individual children's homes, bigger in scale, bigger in geographical spread, and bigger in length of time that it went undetected. I'm shocked about the information that I have seen. So it says that he received a lot of backlash when he published his book. In the early 2 decades since Britain's child migrants have received apologies from 2 prime ministers, multiple governments have paid compensation that they have been key witnesses at Britain's independent inquiry into child sexual abuse in 2017 and Australia's Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse. And so they don't really, they're not, I don't see that they're putting any personal examples here, but apparently this was like a big scandal where they were moving children, migrating children, you know, and the reason why this title caught my eye is because of what we are witnessing today. We're witnessing this. It was just reported by Fox News. I saw it yesterday. 14,000 kids were abandoned. Or not abandoned, but they were unaccompanied children that crossed into the United States, you know, through this border influx. And, you know, again, the big mystery to me is like, what is happening to these children? History is repeating itself. You know, this was a migrant scandal, right? A governmental agency aided in dispersing these children to different places, right? They housed them, or, you know, they found the places they were going to go reside in. And we have the same thing happening right now. We have people in the facade of processing governmental agencies in the United States that are doing this as we speak to migrant children. You know, like history is just repeating its. Like, imagine like years from now, we're gonna have like a whole investigative report that's like, hey, back in 2022 when Title 42 lifted, this is what happened to the migrant children. This is happening right now. That's why it caught my eye. Right? Okay. And we're gonna move to the next title. Yeah, 14,000. 14,000. That's right. I said that. 14. By the way, 14,000 reported unaccompanied children, right? So what about those that got crossed in here somehow, some way, undetected by other adults, and they took them somewhere and we have no idea. We have no record, nothing. But there has been a recorded 14,000 children that were unaccompanied and crossed here. Okay, so let's go to the next title. Police arrest. This is coming from dailyrepublic.com. This is a Solano, Solano County's news source. So the city police arrest American Canyon man in connection with sex trafficking case. Vallejo. Yeah, Vallejo. The city police department this week arrested a man on suspicion of being involved in the kidnapping and sex trafficking of a 17-year-old Nevada girl who was in the car at the time of the arrest. Raymond Joseph Reyes Medina, 21, of American Canyon, was booked into Solano County Jail on suspicion of human trafficking of a minor, 2 felony evading counts, and misdemeanor allegation of obstructing a police officer, the jail log states. Reyes Medina was being held without bail. Pending an extradition hearing, he was scheduled to appear Friday in Solano Superior Court. Police were alerted to the possible human trafficking case by Nevada officials. An arrest warrant had been issued for the suspicion of kidnapping, abuse, or neglect of a child involving sexual exploitation, eluding a peace officer, and sex trafficking of a 17-year-old girl, the police statement said. Officers spotted the vehicle associated with Medina Reyes about 11:30 p.m. Tuesday. An attempt to stop the car was made, but according to police statement, the driver fled the attempted stop. A short pursuit ensued when the vehicle crashed into a center divide in American Canyon. According to the statement, the driver, later identified as Reyes Medina, fled on foot and was quickly apprehended. The 17-year-old girl was among 3 passengers in the car, police said. She was placed in the care of CPS, along with... that's hard. Along with a local juvenile who had been reported missing. The statement of the child, the statement did not make clear whether the second juvenile was from Vallejo or American Canyon or some other local jurisdiction, nor did it indicate that the gender or age of the child. So I think the big story here, if you guys didn't catch it already, that there were other passengers, one that was a missing person, missing child, along with a local child who had been reporting missing. So the 17-year-old girl and then another local child who was also in the passenger. There were 3 passengers in the car. I wonder if the third was a victim as well. But that's the big juice in this entire story. This guy was like trafficking these children. Nevada, it seems to be. All right. Here goes another one. Oh my gosh, yo. I mean, we talked about this the other day, about Georgia politicians that were connected to a human trafficking. Well, in New York, Steuben County legislator pleads guilty in sex trafficking corruption case. A legislator. It doesn't stop. The other 2 men have pled guilty in connection to the Steuben County criminal enterprise case that resulted in a 54-count indictment last year, including Steve Mayo, a county legislator. Steuben County District Attorney Brooks Baker told 18 News on April 22nd that District 2 legislator Steve Mao and Larry Comfort Jr. both pled guilty to solicitation charges in the case. According to Baker, Mayo pled guilty to a misdemeanor charge of solicitation of a person for prostitution, and Comfort Jr. pled guilty to a felony attempted criminal enterprise charge. In addition to the 2 new guilty pleas, Baker said that the Larry Comfort Sr., who pled guilty last month, has now been sentenced to 10 years in prison. Mayo and Comfort Jr. are now set to be sentenced in June of 2022. There's no word whether Mayo will step down as a legislator. Guy, this is a current legislator. A county legislative meeting is scheduled for Monday, April 25th. Steuben County Republican Committee Chairman called on Mayo to resign, saying Steuben County Legislator Steve Mayo is pled guilty to solicitation of a person for prostitution. I once again called him to resign from his office. I first called on him to resign December 2020. Mr. Mayo did not do the right thing for the people of Steuben County at the time. Now that he has finally admitted to criminal activity, he needs to resign and let the county move on. His behavior has been a total disgrace. Again, a Republican. Everybody, every walk of life does this to every walk of life. And I call them out. I don't care what your background is. I don't care what you're affiliated with. You're going to get called out. Republican, Democrat, whatever. I don't care. Blue, orange, yellow party, whatever it is. You're going to get called out. Right? How we can't. Let me just say this. If you're standing on conservative values or Christian values, you can't say you're like about this party who's about Christian values and all these things, and you go off and do these things, these types of things, right? Like you have to have a basis for being a good party, and you can't point your fingers at the other party and say they're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing this. But then our party has the same people who do these things and that don't tighten up their moral attitude. You just can't. So both parties, both parties are corrupt. Both of them. We're trying to clean out one party, but you got people like this in it. Call them out. All right. This next story is coming from Times of San Diego. El Cajon man, 21, jailed for alleged juvenile sex trafficking, child trafficking. Let's change it. An El Cajon man was behind bars on Friday on suspicion of juvenile child sex trafficking crimes involving girls he allegedly groomed for prostitution online. Antoine Lamar Haynes, 21, was taken into custody Thursday afternoon and booked into the suspicion of pandering minors, sending harmful matter to children, and being a felon in possession of a firearm, according to El Cajon Police Department. This is in California. At the time of his arrest near Fletcher Parkway Shopping Center, Haynes allegedly was in possession of an untraceable ghost gun. ECPD Lieutenant Keith MacArthur said investigators have identified at least 2 alleged victims in the case and believe Haynes met the girls through mutual friends and then developed explicit relationships with them via another one. We talked about this 3 consecutive nights. Where did he meet them? On social media. Once again, Haynes has been held at the San Diego Central Jail without bail pending arraignment scheduled for Monday afternoon. Girls. Again, a group of girls. All right. The next story coming from Alaska's newssource.com. And listen, we don't hear a lot from Alaska, but Alaska is one of the bad areas in the United States. Really, really bad. Alaska has it bad. Alaska has it bad, 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 bad. And it's scary because this is probably why we don't hear a lot of these trafficking headlines coming from Alaska. But I'm telling you, like, their policing system is corrupt. Like, they don't have enough police, so they have to, like, literally hire past criminals as police. Like, it's bad. It's bad. All right. An Anchorage man has been convicted of sex trafficking and producing and possessing child pornography after prosecutors say he coerced a teenage girl who had already been trafficked by another man into commercial sex work for his benefit. Prosecutors say 39-year-old Jason Moore, also known as China, sexually exploited a 15-year-old girl in 2019. The U.S. Attorney's Office said that the girl had also been trafficked by Tristan Jamal Grant, a 35-year-old who has been sentenced for 35 years for sex trafficking and human trafficking last year. The documents say that shortly after Moore was released from federal prison for gun and drug charges, he began a sexual relationship with the girl and created explicit photos and videos with her that were posted and shared on social media. When the girl was still 15, prosecutors said that he allowed her to move into his apartment only if she prostituted herself and gave him the money. He sent her quota as his monthly rent amount, set her prices, drove her to the arranged meeting spots, and took the money, prosecutors said. The documents also claim that when the girl was too tired to continue, he gave her methamphetamine to stay awake and that he assaulted her when she resisted him. Prosecutors says Moore faces a mandatory minimum sentence of 15 years, but the sentencing date has not been set yet. Once again, these stories are dark each and every time. Like, every night we come up with the new story, and each story is egregious, egregious, egregious. It's like, this is egregious, this is egregious, this is egregious. No, like, every story seems to be different in variance, but the same tactics. And it's each one is dark and dark and dark and dark. It's not like we're going back to back and one story is lesser than the other. Each one of these are very dark. All right. Next story. Yep. We got a lot today. Next story. A federal investigation into human trafficking and fraud has landed a Christian university at the center of the investigation. All walks of life. What do I say all the time? It's all walks of life. All walks of life. Guys, you can't tell me I'm not fair in my reporting. You can't tell me I'm not fair. Okay? I just call things out for what I see it. Okay? If there's a lot of corruption on one side and People who are advocating for a sexual culture of children, I'm going to say it. If there are pro-MAGA personalities that are reported that they have held women against their will, I'm going to say it. If it is a Christian university that is trafficking out people, call it out. A federal investigation into human trafficking and fraud has landed at a Christian university at the center of the investigation. And this is coming from CENG News. Olivet University, a Christian college with ties to Newsweek co-owner. Oh boy, to a Newsweek that is a spin that I did not have that on my bingo card. A Christian college with ties to Newsweek co-owner is being investigated once again just after 2 years after being fined in a money laundering case, according to federal and local officials. Boy, according to a former senior official with the Department of Homeland Security, the new investigation is looking into money laundering, human and labor trafficking, and visa fraud. The investigation is complex and significant, according to a former official who was briefed on it. Homeland Security Investigations and the department's primary investigative arm, the Riverside County Police officers, searched all of its campus in Anza, California a year ago, according to officials. 7 current and former federal and local officials familiar with the Olivet case confirmed the details in the story to Newsweek. This story to Newsweek. Most of the officials who spoke to Newsweek about the ongoing investigation did so on the condition of anonymity because they are not authorized to do so. Yo! Oh, I have to take a moment. Wait a minute. So you're telling me that an owner of Newsweek is included in this human trafficking investigation? No wonder they go so hard. You always see, they always have these headlines. They are always railing against, oh, this child trafficking is a conspiracy theory and this and that. The sexualized culture is now a conspiracy theory to the right wing. You're telling me that a owner of Newsweek, you guys know Newsweek, right? Let's look up Newsweek just to give you Newsweek. You guys know Newsweek. You've seen this headline before, Newsweek, with the red, the bold, and the dot. A co-owner of Newsweek is implicated in a human trafficking case. My gosh, I'm sorry. I just had to like process that. Took a little bit. Olivet, a little-known Christian university founded by Korean American cleric David Zhang, was thrust into the national spotlight in 2018 when he was charged with money laundering and fraud by the Manhattan District Attorney. Olivet agreed to pay $1.25 million fine after pleading guilty to several charges. Tracy Davis, who is president of the Olivet University at the time of the guilty plea, was recently appointed Dean of Academic Affairs. Newsweek is half owned by her husband, Jonathan Davis. Dev Pragood, Newsweek's CEO and president, who owns the remaining 50%, says he is no longer a member of Zhang's Christian sect, the World Olivet Assembly, and has no ties to Olivet University. My gosh, this story is a gem. Oh my goodness. Literally, this is like a hidden gem. Sometimes we have these little hidden gems. IBT Media, Newsweek's corporate parent until 2018, also led by Jonathan Davis. The investigation included all of its principals and the other corporate entities, including IBT, said that the former DHS official said that the investigation was focused on Olivet. When asked if Newsweek was a target of the probe, Olivet University is currently being investigated by at least 4 federal and local agencies, according to the officials. The search warrant was carried out by the Anza campus of the university April 21st, 2021, according to the Homeland Security Investigations. According to a former senior DHS official who was briefed on the case, federal agents raided the campus in Southern California's high desert region, about 90 miles northeast of San Diego, looking for evidence of fraud, or coercion in relation to the international students, primarily from China or South Korea. There's the human trafficking, in case you were wondering where it was going to come from. Agents were investigating whether all of it, the Christian University, sponsored the U.S. agents, according to the former official who retired from the DHS after the search warrant was executed. Visas for foreign students, mostly from China, who spent a majority of their time in the U.S. working rather than studying, were paid well below the minimum wage. Labor trafficking. The officials did not specify the nature of the work that the students were suspected of doing. They say, I think the remoteness of the campus made it very impractical for people to leave, the former DHS official said, recalling at least one escape. On the day of the raid, Riverside County Sheriff's Department Sergeant Brandy Swan said that the department helped the Riverside County District Attorney's Office and HSI with the investigation. A member of the United States government, according to the former DHS senior official, Labor Department official, was present during the raid. When asked about this role of the investigation, the Department of Labor not only provided a link to sections of this website by explaining workers' rights and the Fair Labor Standards Act. Because of the ownership dispute with Prague, Jonathan Davis claims Newsweek reported on the new investigation. You should be aware that your CEO, Dev Prague, is attempting to use the newsroom and yourself in a corporate shareholder dispute for his own personal gain. He has stated publicly and privately that he wishes to acquire my shares and complete control of the company. To further those goals, he threatened to mischaracterize our relationship with Olivet University, including the subject of your article, using the Newsweek newsroom on multiple occasions. The truth is that we've had a long-standing and mutually beneficial relationship with Olivet University. Jonathan Davis shared screenshots of messages that he described as threats by Prague to use the newsroom as a weapon in any fight with Olivet. Those messages were not confirmed by Newsweek. Finally, you state that your question at IBT Media is under investigation again, but you should be aware that this target is your own CEO, Prague, not me, Davis said. Prague did not respond to questions about this story. A spokesperson for Newsweek stated, Dev Prague is not the subject of any federal investigation. According to the spokesperson, either authorities nor Jonathan Davis or other entities had contacted Newsweek about the investigation. Since its separation from IBT Media, Newsweek has operated independently of Olivet organization. After the split, Jonathan Davis had no role in Newsweek management. According to the spokesperson, any relationship Davis and his wife had with Olivet is a personal matter for them. Boy. Whew. The DHS visit was based on misinformation. Of course it is misinformation, Newsweek. They always do this. Olivet said that in an email statement to Newsweek, agents apologized to the end of the raid. The felony charges, including money laundering, have been dropped, and the case has been resolved as a misdemeanor. Tracy Davis, an academic dean until November 2021, according to Olivet, has now had no role in the university. I want to know more about these kids from China. So they somehow got this case and this investigation dropped. This is where it was internet. It's all right here. Why was this whole human trafficking thing? Why was it just like this little smidget right here? According to a former senior DHS official who was briefed on the case, federal agents raided the campus of Southern California's high desert region. That's a pretty big deal. About 90 miles northeast of San Diego, looking for evidence of forced fraud or coercion in relation to international students, primarily from China and South Korea. Oh, no, ma'am. Olivet. You guys know me. Olivet University. Human trafficking. Here's the Newsweek article. Money laundering. where's the trafficking? That's a pretty big deal. They were raided. Here we go. Why does Newsweek have more information about this than anything? This is so ironic and odd. Federal agents who raided the campus in Southern California's high desert region about 90 miles northeast of San Diego were looking for any evidence of force, fraud, or coercion in relation to the international students who were primarily from China or South Korea. The former official who retired from the DHS after the search warrant was executed told Newsweek that agents were investigating whether all of it sponsored U.S. visas for foreign students, mostly from China, who then spent most of their time in the United States working rather than studying, and who were paid below minimum wage. The officials did not say what kind of work the students were suspected of doing. It's the same quote. It's pretty big. I'm going to dig more into this. I know we're kind of at time now. I'm going to dig more into this because there seems to be more to the story, as you can gather here. But that's a pretty big deal. You know, that's a pretty big deal. What kind of scheme were they running here? They had Newsweek involved. Christian University. What a facade. My gosh. Anyway, guys, I appreciate your time. I hope you guys have a great weekend, or if you're going to listen to me later on, maybe over the weekend or Monday morning, I hope you have a great day. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for supporting me as well. You guys know that I am waiting for my next rotation at the border. So with that being said, I appreciate your support. If you want to give it, it's at nataliedenise.com/donate or thedailytraffic.com. That's the Daily Traffic, TRAFFICK. This will help me with gas. It'll definitely help me with gear, in which I need protective gear, defense gear. And so with that being said, I appreciate all that you guys do. Thank you so much for all of your support. Hey, be sure to grab whatever you're watching or listening on, grab the link, tell somebody about this podcast. Word of mouth is the best word of communication. So tell somebody that you learn a lot on this podcast. Get them to stay tuned to this stuff as well. I mean, look at all this explosive information we're discovering. Newsweek? That was a gem. Okay. So anyway, thank you so much again. Share this, share the link, rate it really well. I love you guys. I am signing out. You didn't know, and now you do. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Unravel with Natalie Denise. Please give this podcast 5 stars.